So today's guest is someone I really wanted on this show because she lives at the intersection of strategy, execution, and actually making revenue happen, not just talking about it in decks. Hila is the co-founder of 10x GTM, an advisor to VCs and startups that have gone from 0 to 400 million in ARR, a 3x founder, a 3x product marketing influencer, and casually works with companies like AWS, Salesforce, Google, Microsoft, the light stuff. She's also an immigrant founder herself, coming from Israel's startup ecosystem to Silicon Valley, and now helps other founders turn big visions into repeatable, scalable go-to-market motions. And today, we are getting into her GTM philosophy, what actually works when you're scaling from 0 to 1, and the relationship drama between PMMs, GTM teams, and basically everyone. Hila, welcome to the show. I'm so glad we are finally doing this.
Thank you so much for having me here, and really nice to see you and all the listeners.
Absolutely. So, Hila, you have seen companies go from literally nothing to hundreds of millions in ARR, which is wild, right? So, when a startup is truly at 0 to 1, what's the one thing founders obsess over that actually doesn't matter yet? And what's the one thing that they consistently underestimate that ends up making or breaking GTM?
Sure. So, in early stage, almost everything we're doing is still in the hypothesis realm. We haven't yet run the experiments, and we didn't get the wrong signal, the right signal, the strong signals. And at this point, I see a lot of founders focus on specific, particular thing. Usually it's speed. Let's do it faster. Leads and the early revenue that they want to see. And if the product has issue and it's not working smooth, they also focus on the road mapping and the specific product creation. But the issue is that they're really losing sight of the bigger picture. They think in details. And usually when you see early traction, it's not meaning that you actually figure out the entire go-to-market motion, and you're going to see a lot of changes in the focus later down the road. And I would say for this stage, you really need to ensure that you stay agile, that you run the experiment, that you constantly ask yourself what is actually going to drive the results. And, a lot of time you feel that you have the product market fit, but the real question are still open. Do you really land on the right price point at this time? Is the cost acquisition actually sustainable for this price point that you put? Or are we quietly starting to lose money on every new customer that coming into the road? And a lot of time we lose sight on that. And I've seen in great companies that scale that have this issue and needed to come back and refine their ICP and refine their pricing point. And, you still keep your eye on the price at this point, but it doesn't mean you're going to scale faster, but it actually means that you need to learn faster, which is, I think, quite different focus. And I would say that it's come to your question about what they underestimate. So founder, what from my perspective, usually underestimate is how hard it's going to be to make the go-to-market working economically, not just to get, more attention and just to see signal for growth, but to actually what's going to generate the pipeline and to create the revenue with repeatable ROI that really scale up.
Right.
And recently I've seen SaaStars speak about it a lot, about the tension that you started to see, that founders really look about the early go-to-market numbers, and they started to see the high CAC coming in and the unclear retribution, and they kind of panic. So they're starting to underinvest, or they hire, people that are not the right match. They bring junior marketers to do the go-to-market, which is great people maybe to do execution, but they are not the people that can really own pipeline or can really ensure that you have the right conversion and ROI. And it's bring you a lot of motion and noise, but not the right progress that you want to see.
Right.
And see it are happening. You see the launches, you see the motion, but the go-to-market system is not becoming predictable and something that you can rely on. And I think that what I see is that the startup really starting to break when they treat the go-to-market as a launch checklist and not as a real learning system as they should. So you really need to ensure that you test the assumption, you fix the pricing, you check the economies before you're scaling, and you're building the team in a way that creating a full engine of growth.
Exactly. I love that you mentioned, because from in a early stage startups perspective, going from 0 to 1, or getting your first customer is like a very happy phase to be in. It should be, but I think with it comes a lot of responsibilities along the lines of pricing, as you've mentioned, like resources that can take up a lot of your budget but end up giving you nothing in return, or no space in the market that you're already competing in. So I think having your first customer is great, but then also planning a lot of strategies around how are you going to make it economical for your early stage startup is the deal breaker.
The biggest mistake or the early mistake is confusing the early interest with the real demand, right? We see it often.
Yeah.
So we
Mm.
think about, we started to see some demos coming in, exciting prospect, pilots that with great companies, and
Yeah.
a lot of time, actually a handful of early deals that coming in and showing traction. But we actually at the point that founders assume that they found something scalable. And it's not always the thing because this traction in many cases is actually false positive. And what they're missing in this stage is the level of urgency. What I want to see is prospect that's saying, this is very painful for me and
Mm.
painful enough to change in my priorities, my budget, and actually my behavior at this point right now. And I have this sense of
Yeah.
urgency. And what startup is doing is they taking this weak signal and they scale based on those. And it's a big issue because you do it early. And then you also a lot of time bring in the wrong people early, which is the salespeople. You start to invest in demand generation without really understanding that conversion that will come. And the assumption is that go-to-market is going to figure out itself and will bring more volume. But it's not true. It's not
Right.
like holding. And in reality, what is actually happen, you don't really need to scale a go-to-market before you have
Right.
a repeatability. And, if deals starting to be closed just dependent on the founder being in the room and involved, and you're starting to need to bring heavy discounts or,
Right.
putting tons of efforts to push it, you don't have a go-to-market fit. And this is the place that you really need to think again and about your fit. And the earliest go-to-market at work should be about ensuring that you are proving things. Like, do we really have a buyer with urgency? And can I really find buyers in a repeatable way? Do we
Right.
have, the pricing in place that really works with the economics? And do the deal really move forward without needing a constant pull and founder intervention? And until you have a true clarity about those questions, the scaling usually is going to create more, amplify of the problem and not fixing the problem.
Exactly. And I think that's also the source of a lot of frustration and pressure on the other teams that are trying to achieve a common ground, but then fail to do so.
And I think that what I see a lot is that when startup that break through the go-to-market, the one that like really do a good job, looking at that like a learning system and not just like a launch checklist or something that they need to ensure that they do by activities. And I think these things are crucial to ensure that you're, bull eye on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I do have a follow up question on that. Like, what's the earliest GTM mistake you have seen getting repeated across all startups?
So, it's coming to always the place that I love to speak about. We really confuse a lot of time early interest with the real demand, meaning that founder a lot of times see like good demos coming in, exciting prospect. They do some pilots with great companies and sometimes they're actually starting to see deals coming over. And then they assume that it's going to be scalable. And this is an issue because the traction in many cases in this stage is actually false positive and we don't see urgency, which is crucial for us. We wanted to see clients come in and say, this is really painful for me to not just be something on my mind, but to make me change the priorities, put budget on that, put the ownership and change behaviors in, the sooner time. And a lot of mistake that they're doing that they actually take a weak signal and they scale based on that. They hire sales early, they put a lot of money on demand generation, but it come early because the conversion is not there. And they hope or assume that the go-to-market is going to figure itself out, find the right path and doing more volume. But actually happening in reality is the opposite. So you don't really need to scale a go-to-market before you have a sure way that it's going to be repeatable. And
Exactly.
it put them in a hard situation that they really need to pull in the CEO many times. The founder need to be involved to the level that without having him, leading, the deals and putting tons of the effort, you don't really close. And then you don't really
Right.
have a go-to-market fit.
I've been in those situations where it has all been mixed up and people don't know what the product is. They don't know the markets. They don't have clear understanding of the ICPs or the basic signals. And then they end up spending a lot of money on demand gen, on paid ads, and then some campaigns that do not deliver or return the ROI that has already, teams have put in. So I think the best way for teams to like make decisions is to actually have clarity on all of these things before they actually spend a lot of money, spend a lot of marketing team's budget into all of these things, and then end up with nothing.
I agree. I agree completely. And when I think about it and I break it down, I think that you need to ensure that you're not going to scale a go-to-market without you prove a few things that need to be
Exactly.
foundational. Do you really have the buyer with urgency? And do we really find buyers repeatedly? And do we have a pricing that work with our economies right now? Deals are really going to move forward without a constant founder that need to be deeply involved. And if you don't have that, until this truth is not founded in a clear way, you really need to ensure that you fix the problem, because the go-to-market, if you push on that, just amplify what you already have to fix.
Right. Absolutely. And let's move on to another question that's kind of similar, but it's focused more towards the PMM and GTM relationship. So, because I feel like on paper, everybody, all the teams, really want to work together, but in reality, it kind of feels like a very dysfunctional group of adults making decisions that do not make sense in practical or whenever things are, very chaotic. So, from your experience, why is there so much friction between PMMs, the marketing team, the sales team, GTM teams, and even everyone who's technically aligned with the same goal but are working or functioning very differently?
Yes. So I'll start with my humor. The person that come in the room and, say everybody what they're going to do and then left the room and say good luck. This is plus minus what we see a lot of time in product marketing. So why we have that friction? Go to market, as we think about it, is owned by everybody, right? Everybody thinks they do go to market, but what actually happened in practice, that no one really fully own it. So on paper, you have this kind of like agreement and clarity about the same goal. We're trying to achieve revenue growth. We're trying to get market share, adoption, all the beautiful KPI. What actually happened? That each function think about their own KPI or its own version of go to market in a different way. And I see the silos happening all the time. When you say go to market to salespeople, they think about closing more deals. When you speak with marketing, they think about generating the demand. When you think about product, they think about the upcoming launch and feature and what's, driving the backlog and make the roadmap checklist. But when the PMM come into the picture, we're trying to connect the dots and say, everybody, okay, guys, this is how it's going to look like, and this is what we're going to do. And the structural issue, we're often asked to do it without authority. So we now have the hypothesis. We want to influence multiple teams. We don't have the authority, and we don't really take full accountability end to end because there's so many cooks in the kitchen, right? So we're going to all these teams, sales, marketing, product, customer success, and we say, guys, this is the positioning, this is the narrative, the channel you're going to act on, this is the point of view, and this is how we go to market. And the execution and the number fall on other people. A lot of accountability is split among different teams, and this creates a lot of tension. People don't like to be told what to do and how to do it. Usually we just go very deep in that and we have a very strong point of view about the show. And after the launch, what we do, we hand over the pitch, everything we created, the deck, and we say like what need to be pulled to the next product or the next launch. And without full ownership about what happened after day one, you're actually not fully responsible, and you're not running the experiments. You are not fixing what is not working. You're not taking full responsibility for the motion that become repeatable. And what I've seen in the past 15 years doing, leading PMM and go-to-market team, most of this collaboration doesn't fall down because people don't work hard or don't care enough, but it's really the lack of ownership for the full go-to-market system.
Yeah, I feel like maybe it's the job of a product marketer to actually, tell the internal story in a way that everybody aligns to it. But I think I don't know how to actually to fix the gap when in reality teams still face a lot of friction when actually working together with these goals. So yeah.
Agree. And something that can help with that, technically,
Yeah.
as VP of PMM, something that I used to do is to interview quickly each one of the main stakeholders. So I can come with a board saying, this is the KPI of each one of the team, and this is what the CEO, the CRO wants to see. And it's helping us to see the bigger goals and call it an OKR. And then the KPIs that come in, up along this funnel, being able to ensure that each one, have their eyes on their specific numbers and goals, but they still see the bigger picture. We're all together working towards. it really helped to make it calmer, because some of my conversations through the years with product team were very hard. They want to see adoption. They want to see the product out there. They don't think about how the buyers is going to perceive it. Is the
Exactly.
pricing make sense? Is the conversation in place? Do we actually have, the right education for the seller at this point to ensure that we close the gaps? And when I'm coming back and say, guys, I see you, but here is the gaps. Here is what's missing today. I need another week to complete 1, 2, 3. So to ensure that it's going to be smooth and the users are going to have a good experience from end to end, it's softened that. But they really need to understand the others. And when you have these numbers on the board and everybody at least see those, I think it's bring more confidence, more clarity to the room.
Exactly. Yeah, I hope people who are struggling and are in this situation do take away some golden nuggets that Hila is sharing today. So I'll have a follow up question based on this. Like, you have worked across positioning, messaging, sales enablement, VOC, voice of customer, competitive intel, all the things PMMs are supposed to do. So, what are the one or two GTM activities that you have seen move revenue, and what are some things teams spend way too much time, look good but don't do much?
Yes, for sure. So, we see a lot spray and pray, right? This kind of approach that we try to do a lot of stuff. And something that I see a lot is the sales team are really actually running about every prospect that are interested and show some level of interest in the product. And they do it without the company itself having a clear strategy about the ICP depth and the vertical focus they want to have.
Yeah.
And at the other time, the other side of that, the marketing is pushing for content, like social activities. And I see a lot of vanity metrics that being celebrated around engagement and impression and stuff that are not really bringing the right deals and converting. And the issue is none of this really anchored to the right account that the company is trying to go after and be more strategically. And I think that focus go to market, it's really crucial to create repeatable revenue. The places that I see crack is the places that there is, motion, but not really a momentum. And you really need to commit to this area and to ensure that you have strategic point of view about the selling, pricing, messaging all around. What happens when you don't have it? That your salespeople are going to, one-off deals. They don't start to see and recognize patterns, and the marketing themselves don't really able to sharpen the narrative and the story. And how us as a PMM finding ourselves always in the middle, supporting everything, but not supporting anything the best, right? And what is actually move the needle, move the revenue, is actually not that flashy and cool as we want to think about it. Number one thing I would say that move the revenue is a clear go-to-market roadmap, meaning that when you started to work on the product roadmap, you need to think holistically about who are going to be targeting the target audience, why the specific buyers are relevant for us, what's the unique angle of the product that really differentiate the story in the market, which channels are actually going to work for us, and how are we thinking about distribution from day one that is going to work over time, what's the
Yeah.
crucial KPIs to focus, and how are we going to iterate and learn and making this a learning system to ensure that we get the signals, get the experiments, get the knowledge, and working on top of that. The other thing that really moved the needle from revenue is the real buyer truth, meaning ensure that we love the buyer and going deeply with that,
Yeah.
understanding pains, the language they speak, what do they care about, how do they today look like, what's the actual alternative they compare us to, and what are the triggers to the buyer decision. And I think that the last one is to go to this experience that we speak about in a very disciplined way. And what we do a lot in 10X is doing a lot of short go-to-market sprint with clear hypothesis when we start and success signals that we're looking after. And we really think about like earning the right to scale, meaning you really earn this right by proving, what converts, not just by doing noise and doing more. And what I think about teams that's working, in this kind of cadence, the one that wins are not the busiest one or the one that are like on top of their, a lot of things, but they look the most focused in my mind.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned all the things that actually move the needle. So, behind the brief, my podcast also stands for things that do not move the needle. So, what's behind the brief? What are the things that the GTM team should retire, not use it? And what's the most overrated GTM tactic that people should just completely, drop it?
It's funny. There is so many of them,
Yeah.
right? And we speak about webinars and events and like content stuff and social. I think that my issue is the KPI you measure. When you are actually measuring the wrong KPIs and whatever like the tactic is, If you go after like engagement, impression, and you're not focusing on conversion for the right ICP, a lot of time you're optimizing for the wrong audience, which really end up with low level, like low quality of leads. And
Right.
I think that when we have that, there is not clarity about ICP and segmentation overall across the board, no clear persona we're going after. So we too often going to celebrate these vanity metrics that looks great. We have a lot of like calendar motion, but it's not really bring the right client and the right growth we want to see.
Absolutely. I love what you shared. One of the biggest complaints that I hear these days is we are aligned but also stuck in meetings all day. I think that that's just a glamorized version of hustling and being busy. So how do you personally create a real alignment between founders, PMMs and revenue teams without drowning in, team meetings, syncs, document sharing, Slack threads that nobody reads? But what do you think are the things that would move the needle, get the attention of your stakeholders?
For sure. When the COVID hit, one of the things I started to feel is that we meet so often. It's like the days that we used to be in the office until 8 or 9. So it's kind of replacing that and feeling active and feeling that we're on top of our things. When everybody was like, living their life, trying to do washing machine and raise kids in the middle of meetings. So obviously the alignment will come from so many meetings and the people actually need to work in the end of the day and start their day. But what it really comes from is leadership clarity. And I hear a lot of the strongest CEO talk about the needs to repeat the same prioritizing ideas again and again and again 20 times until it's really soaking in. And the issue is that a lot of these companies, they try to communicate so many initiatives at the same time. So now you have 20 initiatives, 20 priorities. Each one of them need alignment and explanation and buy-in.
Right.
What it's caused, like the actual effect, is the company is really getting stuck in meeting all day. And teams that really do narrow and focus work on small number of go-to-market priorities and focus on their KPIs and the leadership, reinforce this kind of consistency in all the meetings. They have all hands, leadership meeting, one-on-one meeting. This is the type of conversation that bring clarity. And
Right.
once you do have this clarity, when you do have, clarity and prioritization in place, you can actually give them much more freedom to act upon. And I think that, when your teams really know what matters, what the focus is, what success look like, what you expect from them and what's accountable, it's really help you to create more clarity without so many sinks. So in SaaS companies, generally like in hyper growth companies, I think that usually when you see these meetings coming over alone, so many over the day, it's actually symptoms for no focus and not actually a lack of collaboration.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that because I have always been in startups. So, the pace is very fast. You are always working on something or the other. But one thing I don't find glamorized or I don't find it very exciting as well is if I have a lot of meetings in a day, I know I'm not going to be able to do any work. And I think it all trickles down from leadership as what you have clearly mentioned. Because if the leadership has no idea where the teams are moving ahead, where's the focus. Even if you have some epics or some milestone for a month or a quarter, I think focusing on that really trickles down to the teams that are actually working on it. So, and I've felt it both ways, but having certain things like having so many meetings is not equal to you're doing great work. I feel having decent enough meetings, but the strategy is super strong that you don't have to keep sinking back again, is what like sums up what you have said.
And when I managed my team, product marketing and marketing
Mhm.
teams, I had a few, rules that helped them to shape, manage their time. One, I
Yeah.
asked this day a week to close just for like casual work for them, being able to focus. Second, I asked them to close 2 hours in the week to learn something new, read a book, go to webinar, ensure that you're a long life learner, not just like as an idea. I want to ensure that they're
Yeah.
focused learning on top of their market changes. And then when it comes to meeting, I ask, should you be there? Do you think that you're going to be impactful? Do you have something to contribute? Is there something crucial you need to listen to and follow up? Can you just hear a recording or get a script? And this helped them to choose if to join or not join, giving them some kind of like, slate to get their decision and to feel that they have the back. And in the end of the day, come with point of view, because a lot of these meetings are having a follow-up meeting because they're like all over the place. So my PMM team was expected to come with a few slides or something that they can show, being able to say, this is the goal, this is the time, this is the participant, this is how much time we have to speak about, and this is summarizing the actual action item and follow up with an email to ensure that
Right.
some of the stuff can be, done by, different teams and then follow up without extra meetings. So it helped a lot to be able to lead with a strong point of view and clarity what's going on and what's the future or the follow up going to look like.
Exactly. And I love that. Your team is very lucky to have you.
I always think about my PMMs and my employees as people that are going to build their own business in the future if they just want to.
Exactly.
It's very like about the current role. It's about building people that building their own career in the future.
Absolutely. Are you hiring? Just asking.
Maybe in a few months.
That's amazing. So I'll move on to another question. You have mentioned like you work with a lot of founders and founder-led startups, and a founder-led GTM can be really powerful but also chaotic, as we have discussed previously. So what advice would you give to founders who want to stay close to GTM but are accidentally becoming the bottleneck, or worse, overriding the teams that they have hired?
Sure. So obviously, founder-led go-to-market is a super powerful thing and crucial in the early stages. And they really need to stay close to the go-to-market. It's not just like, from sales perspective, but they need to be able to stay close to the customers, keeping their really gut feeling that is crucial there, what's resonate, what's work, what's not working, what people actually buy and why they do it. And they should be speaking with customer very often on a regular basis. And I would say many times we see that founders are actually the strongest closer for the entire company, right? And they are like, they're a situation that they're really needed and they're kind of like a powerful card. But the issue is that things starting to break is, when founder actually the way they get involved or how they get involved. And when they're involved in everything from day one, they actually lose their power because deals become, I would say founder dependent at some level, and teams start stuff like don't have the confidence to build by themselves process to really ensure that you close. And I think that from this on, you need to delegate to ensure that the team actually have the space, have the motion to be able to run, sales processes by themselves, manage the pipeline, do their campaigns, develop the launch plans, and be able to follow up the deals themselves and honestly make some mistakes, learn from that, iterate, and be able to starting to run their own playbooks. I think that if you're in a situation that most of your deals needs the CEO to close, you problem with GTM scale and you really, see it stills and need to fix that.
Exactly. And I love that you mentioned that if you really need a founder in the sales calls to close the deals, you are just running in loops. In my previous companies that I've worked, I have seen salespeople super empowered only because the founders were not anywhere near the entire sales process. Be it with the product that they are selling, narrative they are talking about, or in general the positioning that they're actually using. I really like that fact because that's a really small pulse, but it makes a huge impact when you're actually letting the GTM engine flow. That's a really nice perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. So moving on to one last question. Looking back at your journey, like we have been working in startups, consulting, VC, and advisory. If you were to join an early stage startup today, as the first PMM or a GTM leader, what would you do in your first 90 days to set the foundation right?
I love this one because I've been the first PMM and go-to-market leader in all the companies I joined, which was kind of a crazy journey, if you can imagine,
Yeah.
because you need to invent the wheel. And many times I didn't know anything. I needed to learn a new industry and even product marketing from scratch at the time. So yes, I would say, as always, I'm starting with the buyer, meaning I really want to deeply understand who is buying, who are the prospects, who are we targeting, who influences the decision, and who are the users that actually use the day-to-day in the product, which is different from the buyers.
Right.
And a lot of time, companies really know their like core user, but they don't really know the real buyers, which I think is really interesting. At the same time, I would say that I would map the internal assumption of the different team leaders. I'm speaking with head of sales, head of product, head of marketing, and leadership executive to really understand what they believe and using we started to see some interesting patterns about how different is the point of view. Who do we think we're selling to? What do they think is actually working? What is broken? What is making us to grow? What should be the growth come from in the future? And you started quickly to started to see that they're pulling you in very, very different direction, which usually see that the GTM starting to crack or to have some level of friction there. And I think that in this point, to think about the go-to-market and being able to map it from operationally from day one is also crucial. More than that, like what are the system, what are the tools used today, how is the handoff and processes look like, and what happened the day after lunch. We speak a lot about the day after lunch, but what happened in the next day? And a lot of time, go-to-market won't fail when you launch. It looks great. But it will take a few weeks or months after when you don't see adoption, when the sales feedback is not getting to the right place and it's not getting implemented, when the usage is not matching the narrative we had or the assumption we had. And this is also places that it's important to go deeper to understand product from the product people, understand the product unique capability, deep dive to the differentiator, how product actually creates actual real results for the customer, not just like promises. And what product team actually think is the, competitors, what's the alternative they think that are crucial for the product? Because a lot of time, this is the place that the buyers actually compares us and think about us against in the other alternative. And for me, it's crucial to understand KPIs. What are the clear KPIs? Why I was hired to the role? What's my manager KPIs? Think about the stakeholder I mentioned from different teams. What do they think about their success and how do they measure their own KPIs? And ensure that we have alignment across the board to prevent the chaos that usually come down the road. And once I have clarity on all of these elements, usually I focus on two areas. One is the quick wins. What are the places that I can see the low-hanging fruits, take the first project and build the trust and credibility across board, people starting to see that product marketing actually drive results. Yeah. And the other one will be a strategic, I would say, initiative for the long run, starting to planning and developing something deeper, meaningful that I see that in my top priorities to impact the roadmap for the long term. When it comes, in the end of the day, customers are key from early on. Tracking and creating consistent conversation with customers, buying from the signals that I get from the field and the data, and ensure that on the regular basis we speak and get opinion and knowledge from the client, not just assumption. And the most important stuff in the end, building allies across the organization, with your peers, with your employees, with the leadership, creating these kind of bonds that are crucial to create impact and buy-in. And the last one is something that overlooked. I care about myself. So focus on myself. These kind of roles are very intense, ambiguous, crazy and with high pressure. To focus on ensure that you have the right energy in the right place, you have clarity, and just ensuring that we think about our self-care as much as we think about growing the company and focus on the creation.
Absolutely. You discussed many things, what it actually takes to be a product marketer at a very early stage startup, how you really think about GTM as a system and not as a launch checklist. So as much as it comes down to, building clarity, trust and execution. And it definitely reflected in the examples that you shared today. So for anyone listening who's building, scaling or quietly fighting GTM chaos behind the scenes, I know this episode should have hit home. And thank you so much for joining me. I'm Shruti. This is Behind the Brief. And thank you once again, Hila, and also people who would want to ask any GTM related questions or maybe check up with you if you're hiring for a PMM role. Where should they contact you?
For sure. So Hila Lauterbach at LinkedIn, always happy to meet new people and to speak, and 10xgtm.com, my website.
Perfect. I hope people check out your website and all the things that you are doing in your own startup. And thank you so much. This is Shruti and we are signing off from Behind the Brief.